The girl grew up in a place most people passed without looking twice. It was a narrow area behind old factories, where smoke often hung in the air, and the ground was always dark with dust and ash. Houses were built close together with broken walls, rusted roofs, and windows covered by plastic sheets. Every morning, the smell of burnt coal and garbage filled the streets before the sun was fully up. She was still very young. Yet life had already taught her more pain than joy. Her days began before sunrise. While other children slept, she was already awake, tying her worn sandals and preparing herself for another long day. There was no room for complaints. Hunger waited for no one. She earned small money by doing whatever work she could find. Sometimes it was cleaning places no one else wanted to touch. Sometimes it was carrying heavy loads for people who paid her almost nothing. Her hands were rough, her clothes always dusty, and her body often sore. Still, she never refused work. Refusing meant going to bed hungry. Home was not a place of comfort. It was only a shelter from rain and cold. Inside, voices were often loud and angry. Kind words were rare. She learned early to stay quiet, to move carefully, and to avoid attention. Silence became her shield. Many nights, she lay awake staring at the dark ceiling, listening to sounds outside. She wondered how life could be so unfair. She had done nothing wrong, yet every day felt like punishment. Still, somewhere deep inside her, there was a small flame that refused to die. It whispered that maybe, just maybe, life could be different. The neighborhood knew her story, even if no one spoke about it openly. People saw her thin frame, her tired eyes, and the way she flinched at sudden noises. Some felt pity but did nothing. Others believed it was not their problem. In that place, everyone was busy surviving their own pain. She often passed by a large, open area near the factories where hot ashes were dumped after long work shifts. The ground there was warm, sometimes even smoking. It was dangerous, but she crossed it daily because it was the shortest route. As she walked, she would imagine the ashes were clouds, and she was walking above the world. Free and light. When she was younger, she had dreams like other children. She wanted to study, to wear clean clothes, to laugh without fear. But dreams felt heavy now, like a luxury she could not afford. Reality had slowly pressed them down, layer by layer. One evening, after a long day of work, she returned home exhausted. Her body ached, and her head felt heavy. She had earned just enough to buy a small piece of bread. She ate it slowly, making it last as long as possible. That bread was her dinner and her comfort. Outside, the sky turned orange as the sun set behind the factories. Smoke rose into the air, mixing with the evening light. She watched it through a broken window and felt a strange sadness. Another day had ended, and tomorrow would be the same. Inside the house, tension hung thick. She kept to herself, trying not to be noticed. Experience had taught her that attention often brought trouble. She moved quietly, like a shadow. As night fell, the sounds around her grew quieter, but her thoughts grew louder. She thought about other lives she had seen from a distance. Cars passing on the main road, people wearing clean clothes, talking on phones, laughing freely. It felt like another world. She wondered if anyone out there would ever notice her. Not as a problem, not as cheap labor, but as a human being. The thought both warmed and hurt her heart. Sleep came late. Her body rested, but her mind stayed awake. Memories of harsh words and hard days played again and again. Still, she held on to one belief. If she survived today, she could survive tomorrow. Days passed in the same way. Work, silence, hunger, and tiredness became her routine. She grew used to pain, though it never truly left. Her eyes, once bright, now carried a quiet sadness. Sometimes, she helped other children in the area when she could, sharing a piece of bread, showing them how to avoid trouble, warning them about unsafe places. Helping others gave her a small sense of purpose. One afternoon, while working near the factories, she felt dizzy from heat and exhaustion. The ground beneath her feet was hot with ashes. For a moment, she thought she might fall. She stopped, took a deep breath, and steadied herself. No one noticed. No one asked if she was okay. That moment scared her. She realized how fragile her life was. One wrong step, one bad day, and she could be gone. The world would move on without even knowing her name. That night, she cried quietly into her hands. Not loudly, not for long, just enough to release the pain she carried inside. Tears were private. Weakness was dangerous. Yet even in that darkness, the small flame inside her refused to go out. She promised herself something simple. She promised that she would keep going. No matter how hard it became, she would keep walking forward. She did not know that fate was already moving. That somewhere beyond the smoke and ashes, a man lived a life so different from hers that it felt unreal. A man surrounded by wealth, power, and comfort. A man who had everything except a sense of meaning. Their worlds had never touched. They were separated by walls, roads, and circumstances. But life has a strange way of crossing paths. As she closed her eyes that night, tired and worn, she had no idea that her suffering was nearing a turning point. The ashes she walked through every day would soon lead her toward something she had never known. Hope for now. She slept, unaware that this was the last chapter of her life, lived only in shadows. The next morning, the girl woke before sunrise as usual, but the weight on her shoulders felt heavier than before. The ache in her body from yesterday's work had not gone away. Her arms and legs felt stiff, and her head throbbed faintly. Still, she forced herself to get up. There was no other choice. She stepped outside. The cool morning air brushing her face, carrying the faint smell of burnt ashes from the factories nearby. Birds were already flying above, chirping freely, as if the world belonged to them. She envied them, even if she would never show it. She kept her thoughts to herself. Expressing them could bring unwanted attention. The streets were quiet, but not empty. A few people had already started moving, carrying their goods, sweeping the ground, or rushing to their workplaces. Some glanced at her but didn't speak. People had learned to live alongside suffering without touching it. She had become part of the scenery, a shadow among shadows, by mid-morning. She was at the market, carrying sacks of rice and vegetables for small shop owners. The heat was rising, making her clothes stick to her skin. Each step was heavier than the last. Some customers shouted for their orders, some ignored her completely. The money she earned barely covered her next meal, but it was enough to keep her going, enough to remind her that she was still alive. During lunch, she sat in a corner behind a small wall. She unpacked a thin piece of bread wrapped in a torn cloth. She chewed slowly, savoring each bite, because tomorrow there might not be enough. Around her, people laughed and talked loudly. Their voices reminded her of a world she could only watch from the sidelines. She longed to be part of it, yet knew it was impossible, returning home. She passed through narrow alleys that smelled of smoke and garbage. Her feet hurt from walking barefoot over stones and hot ashes. She noticed a small boy crying in one of the alleys, holding a broken toy. He reminded her of herself, small, fragile, and lost. She offered him a piece of her bread, but he shook his head. Still, she felt a tiny connection, a moment of shared struggle. At home, things were worse than usual. Voices raised in anger, objects thrown, windows rattling. She knew better than to intervene. Silence was her only protection. She moved quickly to her corner, covering herself with a thin blanket. Her mind was already preparing for the night, for another cycle of endurance and careful survival. As darkness fell, she thought of the factory area where the ashes glowed faintly under the street lamps. She remembered yesterday's moment of dizziness and weakness, and fear settled in her chest. Each day could bring the same, or worse. She shivered, realizing how easily life could slip away. The thought made her heart pound. But she forced herself to breathe steadily. The night grew colder, and the sounds of the neighborhood softened. Yet the fear remained. She imagined herself walking through fire, running away from voices that hurt, people who didn't care. Her mind wandered to a distant place where no one screamed, where people smiled without cruelty. But she knew that place was just a dream. Some nights she tried to imagine a different life. She pictured herself walking down streets where no one hit or shouted, where food was plentiful, where she could laugh freely. These thoughts made her both happy and sad. Happiness was fleeting, and the sadness reminded her of the harsh reality she could not escape. One night, a sudden shout outside made her flinch. Someone had fallen, and people were shouting in panic. She stayed silent, hoping no one noticed her. Life had taught her that attention often led to pain. She watched from the corner, her small heart racing, feeling powerless to help. Weeks went by, and the cycle continued. Each day brought the same struggle, the same hunger, the same fear, but she began noticing small things, a kind word from a neighbor, a small moment of laughter from another child, the warmth of the sun on her face. These moments were rare, but they reminded her that life still had some light. She also began noticing people who passed by her regularly. Some looked at her with curiosity, some with pity, some with indifference. She did not know them, and they did not know her. Still, she felt a strange connection with these fleeting glances, as if the world was slowly acknowledging her existence. One afternoon, as she worked near the factory, she heard voices she had never heard before. Men in clean clothes were speaking quickly, pointing toward the hot ash area. Something about them made her pause. They were not like the usual workers or shopkeepers. There was urgency in their tone, and it sent a shiver down her spine. She watched quietly, staying in the shadows. That night, she could not sleep. Her thoughts kept returning to the men she had seen. Something felt different. A feeling she could not explain, a mixture of curiosity and fear. She wondered if they had come for her or for something else. Either way, it made her heart beat faster. She realized that life had a way of bringing unexpected changes. Sometimes sudden, sometimes frightening. Over the next few days, her life continued in its usual pattern, but her mind had changed. She started paying more attention to small signs, small changes around her. She noticed the way the sun fell on the ashes, the pattern of shadows, the footsteps of strangers passing by. Every detail seemed important now, as if her survival depended not just on her body, but on her awareness. One evening, while she was walking home, she saw a man standing near the corner of her street. He was different from anyone she had seen. His clothes were clean, his shoes shiny, and he carried himself with confidence. But there was something in his eyes, a sharpness, a curiosity that made her heart skip a beat. She felt watched, but not in a threatening way. She walked faster, hoping to disappear into the shadows. That night, she could not stop thinking about the man. Who was he? Why was he there? Had he noticed her struggle, her small existence in the vast, harsh world? She felt a mixture of hope and fear, emotions she had not allowed herself to feel in a long time. It was confusing and overwhelming. The next morning, she returned to her usual routine, but the thought of the man lingered. Every step she took, every glance she cast over her shoulder reminded her of him. Life in the neighborhood remained harsh, but a small spark of curiosity and hope had been ignited within her. She began to imagine what it would be like if someone truly cared. Someone who would see her not as a shadow, not as labor, not as a problem, but as a person. The thought felt dangerous, like opening a door that had been locked for years. Yet she could not stop thinking about it. Her mind wandered to possibilities she had never dared to consider. Days passed, and the man appeared again, seemingly by chance, in different places near the factories. Each time she felt a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. She did not approach him, did not speak, but his presence lingered in her mind, growing into a quiet sense of expectation. One evening, after an exhausting day, she collapsed for a moment near the hot ash area. The heat, fatigue, and hunger had overwhelmed her. She lay there quietly, breathing hard, unsure if she could rise again. And then, as if by fate, the man appeared near her side. He did not speak immediately. He watched her with concern, not judgment, not anger, just concern. She felt something shift within her. The fear that had been constant in her life mingled with a small glimmer of hope. For the first time in many years, she did not feel completely alone. Someone had noticed her struggle. Someone had paused their life to see her pain. She did not know it then, but this moment would become a turning point. The man's presence, his quiet attention, marked the beginning of a change she could not yet imagine. Her life, lived in ashes and shadows, was on the verge of transformation. The cruel days of struggle were not over. But a new possibility had entered her world, and so she rose slowly, her body weak, but her spirit stirred. She knew nothing about the future, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a fragile, fragile hope that perhaps, somehow, life might change. The man returned the next morning. Walking slowly through the narrow streets near the factories, his eyes were alert, scanning the surroundings as if he were looking for something important. The girl noticed him from a distance but kept her distance. She was cautious, knowing that curiosity could be dangerous in her world. He moved carefully, avoiding the areas that looked dangerous, but his attention kept coming back to her. There was something in her posture, the way she moved quietly, the way her eyes flicked from shadow to shadow that caught his attention. He paused for a moment, observing her, as if trying to understand a story hidden in her silence. The girl felt a strange tension inside her. She had lived her whole life avoiding attention, and here was a man whose presence was unavoidable. His eyes were not cold or cruel like the others. They held something else, an unexpected softness, a concern that made her heart race in ways she did not understand. Over the next few days, he appeared in different places near the factories. Sometimes she caught glimpses of him while carrying heavy loads, sometimes when resting briefly in the shadowed corners. Each time, she felt a mixture of fear and curiosity. Who was he? Why did he notice her? Was it dangerous to be seen? One evening, after she had finished her work, she found herself sitting near a small alley, exhausted and trembling from hunger and fatigue. The sky was painted in soft shades of orange and pink, but she could hardly see it. Her thoughts were clouded with worry and pain. The man appeared quietly beside her. He did not startle her as most people did, but she could not help flinching. He held a small bag in his hand. Without speaking immediately, he placed it gently in front of her. Inside were simple items: a piece of bread, a small bottle of water, and a blanket. She stared at him, unsure what to do. No one had ever offered her anything without expecting something in return. Her first instinct was to reject it, to push it away, to remain invisible. But hunger and exhaustion were stronger than fear. She took the bread in trembling hands and ate slowly, savoring each bite. The warmth of the food and the small act of kindness awakened something inside her that had been dormant for years, a feeling of being seen, being acknowledged, and being cared for. The man spoke for the first time in a gentle voice. He did not ask her name, did not demand anything. He simply said that she deserved better, that life should not be this hard. She listened, wary but intrigued. His words were unlike anything she had heard from the people around her. There was no anger, no judgment, only concern. Days turned into weeks, and their silent understanding grew. He did not force himself into her life, did not demand trust immediately. He appeared at intervals, always careful, always observing, always offering small gestures of care. Sometimes it was food, sometimes a blanket, sometimes simply a watchful presence. Through his actions, she began to understand something new. There were people in the world who could care without using fear or force. She learned to watch him as well, noticing that he seemed interested not in profit or recognition, but in understanding, in making a small difference. One afternoon, while she was walking along a narrow street carrying a heavy load, she stumbled. The weight and exhaustion overwhelmed her. Before she could regain balance, the man appeared at her side, steadying her. He did not scold, did not ask questions. He simply held her steady until she could continue. That moment, small as it seemed, had a profound effect. She realized that trust was not just words, but actions repeated over time. And for the first time in her life, she felt the faintest glimmer of hope that someone might actually protect her. As the days went by, he began to ask gentle questions about her life, her daily struggles, and her dreams. She answered cautiously, at first with small words, then with more honesty as she sensed his patience. He listened, truly listened, without judgment. That simple act of listening was something she had never experienced before, and it began to heal a part of her that had long been closed off. The neighborhood continued to be harsh and indifferent, but the moments with him became a sanctuary in her mind. She would imagine his presence during the hardest parts of her day, drawing strength from the memory of his concern. Her work remained grueling, her home still cold and unkind. But she felt a small inner light that reminded her she was not completely alone. One evening, as the sky darkened and the air grew cooler, he stayed a little longer than usual. He shared a small story about someone who had faced challenges but eventually found safety and peace. She listened with wide eyes, imagining the possibility of a life beyond ashes and cruelty. The story gave her courage, not in words, but in the possibility it represented. She began to notice subtle changes in herself. Her steps were a little steadier, her hands a little less tired, and her eyes a little brighter. The flame inside her, once barely alive, began to grow stronger. She started to believe that perhaps life could be more than survival, that there might be a future where fear and pain were not constants. At night, when she lay under her thin blanket, she no longer felt completely helpless. She would think of the man, of his careful attention and kindness, and let herself imagine a world that seemed impossible before. A world where someone cared, where she could be safe, where she could dream without fear. The man never asked for her trust outright. He knew it could not be demanded. Instead, he earned it slowly, day by day, through small gestures, steady presence, and consistent care. Each time she allowed herself to notice him, to accept a small kindness, a bit of food, or a moment of guidance, her hope grew. Weeks passed, and the bond between them deepened silently. She began to understand that not all people were cruel, that not all eyes watched with malice. Some watched with care, and in that care, she found a new strength. By now, she could see a faint shift in her own life. She was still working, still tired, still cautious, but she no longer felt entirely trapped. The small interactions, the quiet gestures, and the understanding presence of the man gave her courage to face each day with a bit more resilience. She began to imagine the possibility of a life where she did not always have to be invisible. Her story, once lived entirely in shadows and ashes, was slowly beginning to change. The man's presence marked the start of a turning point that would lead her from suffering to safety, from fear to trust, and from isolation to hope, though she did not yet know the full extent of how her life would change. She had started to believe that someone, somewhere, had noticed her, and that was the first step toward something greater. The days of complete despair were not over, but a new possibility had entered her world, quietly and carefully. Like a seed waiting to grow, days turned into weeks, and the girl's life slowly began to change in ways she could not have imagined. It started with small things: extra food left for her at the end of the day, a warm blanket during the cold nights, and occasional quiet moments with the man who had noticed her suffering. Each small act was a seed, slowly planting a sense of safety and comfort where fear had always lived. The girl began to pay attention to these moments, realizing they were not accidents. The man did not come to shout or demand. He came to notice, to care, and to act quietly. That presence, steady and patient, started to make a difference in her spirit. Slowly, the walls she had built around herself began to show cracks. Letting in small beams of light she had forgotten existed, she started to accept the food he offered without suspicion. The first time, she had hesitated, thinking it might be a trick. But the consistency of his care made her realize he wanted to help, not to take advantage. For the first time, she felt that someone outside her harsh world actually understood her struggles. The man began asking her small questions about herself, her routines, and her dreams. At first, she spoke cautiously, afraid of revealing too much. But his patience made her feel safe. There was no pressure, no judgment, just an interest that seemed genuine. Gradually, her words grew longer, her explanations more detailed, and her guarded heart began to open. With the man's guidance, she started noticing parts of her life that could change. She learned to wash her hands carefully, to take small steps in protecting herself, and to navigate the streets with a little more confidence. Each tiny skill was a victory, a signal that she was capable of more than mere survival. He also began introducing her to knowledge in small ways. He did not push books or lessons, but he shared stories, explained simple ideas, and encouraged curiosity. She listened eagerly, realizing that learning could be a form of freedom. Each new fact, each new understanding, was a spark lighting the dark corners of her mind. Her days of complete fear did not end immediately. The neighborhood remained harsh, and her home was still a place of tension. But with a man's presence, she discovered a space where she could breathe, where her mind could rest without constant worry. She began to imagine a future where safety was possible, where laughter could exist alongside work, where she might dream without fear. She also began to notice her own resilience. There were moments when she stumbled, when exhaustion and pain threatened to overwhelm her. But she realized she could rise, could continue, and could endure. The man never allowed her to forget that her strength was remarkable, even when she herself did not recognize it. One afternoon, he took her to a quiet place away from the crowded streets, where the air was clean and the ground was soft underfoot. It was a park, small but beautiful, with grass and trees and sunlight filtering gently through leaves. She had never been to a place like this. She touched the grass cautiously, feeling its softness, and marveled at the simplicity of such a thing. There, he encouraged her to speak freely, to share her thoughts and fears. She hesitated at first, then slowly began to talk. She spoke of her life, the struggles, the loneliness, and the dreams she had buried. The man listened patiently, never interrupting, never dismissing. His quiet attention gave her the courage to speak truths she had never shared with anyone in those moments. She discovered a new feeling: trust. It was delicate and fragile, but it grew steadily. She realized that trust could exist even in a world that had shown her only cruelty. And with trust came hope, small but persistent, whispering that her life could change for the better. The man also helped her understand that her pain did not define her. He spoke of resilience, courage, and the power of small steps. He reminded her that every small action, every choice to keep going, was a victory. She began to see herself not as a victim, but as someone capable of change, someone with value and potential. Over time, her physical health improved slightly. The small gifts of food and rest allowed her body to regain strength. She learned to care for herself, to find small ways to protect her body and mind. Each improvement was a reminder that life could be gentle, if only in moments. She also began to dream again. At first, the dreams were small, clean clothes, a warm meal, a safe place to sleep. But as trust and hope grew, so did the dreams. She imagined studying, exploring the world, helping others, and maybe one day living without fear. The dreams became a source of motivation. Pushing her to endure each day with a little more determination, the man's actions continued to shape her understanding of kindness. She realized that true help was not always loud or dramatic. It could be quiet, consistent, and patient. These acts did not demand gratitude. They taught her the value of compassion and the strength of human connection. Through these experiences, she also began to reflect on her past. The abuse and neglect had left scars, but she learned to acknowledge them without letting them control her. She started to see her pain as part of her story, not the entirety of it. And in that perspective, she discovered a new kind of strength, one built on survival, resilience, and the capacity to accept care. The relationship between the girl and the man became a quiet partnership. He provided guidance, protection, and care, while she offered her willingness to learn, to trust, and to endure. Together, they created a space where growth was possible, where fear could slowly be replaced by hope, by now. She could navigate the streets with a little more confidence, speak more openly about her needs, and recognize moments of kindness in ways she had never known. Each day was still challenging, but the challenges no longer felt insurmountable at night. When she lay under her blanket, she no longer felt completely alone. The man's presence, though sometimes distant, had given her a sense of stability. She could close her eyes and imagine a life where she was safe, cared for, and capable of pursuing her dreams. That vision became a source of comfort and motivation. The neighborhood remained indifferent, harshness of life still present. But she had discovered a sanctuary within herself, and in the quiet guidance of someone who truly cared. She realized that life could contain moments of gentleness, trust could exist, and that hope was not just a dream, it could become a reality. Her transformation was gradual but undeniable. She had moved from mere survival to a state of cautious optimism. Each small step, each moment of care, each act of kindness had built a foundation upon which she could begin to construct a life beyond fear. And so, as days continued to pass, she took each step with growing confidence, allowing herself to hope for the future. The journey was far from over. But she had discovered something invaluable, the belief that her life could be more than suffering, that she could heal, and that she could begin to rise from the ashes that had once defined her existence. The girl's life continued to change slowly but steadily. The days that once felt heavy with fear and pain now carried small moments of hope. The streets were still harsh, the neighborhood still indifferent, but she had discovered a new strength within herself. She had learned to trust carefully, to find small joys, and to take steps toward a life she had never dared to imagine. The man continued to watch over her, his presence quiet but unwavering. He never rushed her, never forced her to do anything she was not ready for. He provided guidance, support, and protection in ways that allowed her to grow at her own pace. Each act of kindness became a lesson, showing her that life could contain care, patience, and compassion. Her body grew stronger with better nourishment and rest. The exhaustion that had once been constant began to fade. She could walk longer without collapsing, carry heavier loads without fear, and even smile more often. These physical changes mirrored the emotional transformation within her. She began to feel capable, not just of survival, but of living. Education became a part of her life in small ways. The man introduced her to books, simple lessons, and stories that opened her mind to possibilities beyond her neighborhood. She learned to read, to understand numbers, and to think about the world differently. Each new piece of knowledge was a key, unlocking doors she had never realized existed. She also began to explore her creativity, drawing with sticks in the dirt, imagining stories, and expressing thoughts she had kept hidden for years. The freedom to create, even in small ways, gave her a sense of control over her life that she had never experienced. She began to dream bigger, imagining a life beyond hardship, where she could contribute, create, and experience joy. The bond between her and the man deepened into a quiet, mutual respect. He did not see her as a project or a charity case. He saw her as a human being with immense potential, someone worthy of care and attention. And she, in turn, began to see him as more than a rescuer. He became a mentor, a guide, and a symbol that life could offer more than pain. One day, he took her to a place she had never imagined, visiting a clean, bright space filled with books, comfortable furniture, and people speaking kindly. It was a center for learning, growth, and care. She was overwhelmed at first, unsure if she belonged there, but the man stood beside her. Giving her the courage to take small steps forward, she began to interact with others cautiously, learning social skills and experiencing kindness in ways that were entirely new. The people around her treated her with respect, listened to her thoughts, and offered help when needed. For the first time, she experienced community and connection in a positive, nurturing environment. The girl also began to confront her past in subtle ways. She learned to speak about the hardships she had endured, not with shame, but with acknowledgement and strength. By sharing her story with trusted people, she found relief and empowerment. The fear that had defined her life began to lose its power, replaced by understanding and resilience. Her sense of self grew. She started to understand that her worth was not defined by her past, by abuse, or by neglect. She was more than the hardships she had faced. Each day, she grew more confident, more capable, and more willing to embrace life's possibilities. The man continued to encourage her to pursue her dreams, no matter how small they seemed. He reminded her that each step forward, no matter how minor, was progress. He emphasized the importance of patience, perseverance, and self-belief. His words, combined with her experiences, created a strong foundation for the life she was beginning to build. The girl's relationship with her The neighborhood began to shift subtly as well. People noticed her growing confidence and strength. While the environment did not change entirely, she had learned to navigate it with skill and awareness. She was no longer merely surviving. She was beginning to thrive in small but meaningful ways. She also discovered the power of helping others. Small acts of kindness, like sharing food, guiding children, or simply listening, brought her joy and purpose. Through helping, she realized that she could contribute positively to the world around her. Breaking cycles of pain and neglect she had once thought inevitable. Her nights became calmer. Sleep was no longer a time of fear and dread, but a time of rest and reflection. She dreamed of possibilities, of places she wanted to visit, of knowledge she wanted to gain, and of a life filled with hope. These dreams became a guiding force, motivating her to continue moving forward. Over time, she began to understand the depth of change in her life. The small flame that had survived through hardship had grown into a steady light. She could feel it in her steps, in her thoughts, and in her ability to face challenges with courage. She was no longer defined solely by suffering, but by resilience, hope, and potential. The man's influence remained vital, but she had also learned to rely on her own strength. She realized that while guidance and support were important, the courage to continue, to grow, and to dream came from within her. This realization empowered her to take control of her life in ways she had never imagined possible. One afternoon, she walked through her neighborhood with a sense of purpose. The alleys, the narrow streets, and the remnants of hardship no longer intimidated her entirely. She navigated them with awareness, caution, and confidence. She understood the dangers, but also recognized her capacity to handle them. This awareness marked a profound shift from the fear that had once dominated her every step. She began to set goals for herself. Simple at first, learning a new skill, reading a book, helping someone in need, but each achieved goal reinforced her sense of capability. The accumulation of small successes gave her confidence to dream bigger and aim higher. Her relationship with the man evolved naturally. He remained a protector and guide, but allowed her independence to grow. He celebrated her achievements quietly, encouraged her dreams, and provided support when challenges arose. This balance of care and freedom helped her develop self-reliance while still feeling supported. As months passed, she began to envision a future that once felt impossible. She imagined continuing her education, exploring new places, meeting new people, and contributing to society. She imagined a life where she could help others, break cycles of pain, and inspire those who were still trapped in hardship. Her inner world had transformed dramatically. The fear, pain, and hopelessness that had once dominated her thoughts had been replaced by resilience, hope, and a growing sense of purpose. Each day reinforced her belief that change was possible, that her past did not dictate her future, and that she had the power to shape her own life, eventually. She began to dream not only for herself but for others. She thought of children still trapped in circumstances like hers, of people struggling silently in the shadows. She realized that her survival and transformation could serve as an example and inspiration. The hope she had received could be shared, multiplied, carried forward. The journey from ashes to hope had been long, difficult, and filled with uncertainty. But the girl had endured, grown, and transformed. The small flame inside her had become a guiding light, leading her toward a life of possibility, safety, and purpose. In the end, she stood stronger, wiser, more resilient than she had ever imagined. She had experienced the worst of life, but had also discovered the power of kindness, patience, trust, and hope. The world she once feared had become a place she could navigate, influence, and grow within. Her past remained a part of her story, but it no longer controlled her. She had risen from the ashes, carrying hope in her heart, ready to embrace the future with courage and determination. Life had shifted dramatically for the girl, but the journey was far from over. The strength and hope she had built over the past months had given her a new perspective. She understood that survival was no longer enough. She wanted to live fully, to explore her potential, and to contribute in ways that mattered. Each day now carried a sense of purpose, a chance to grow beyond what she had ever imagined. The man continued to provide guidance. but he gave her more freedom than before. He encouraged her to make decisions for herself, to take responsibility for her choices, and to step into a life that belonged to her. This trust in her abilities boosted her confidence, helping her realize that she could navigate challenges independently. Even while knowing she had support if needed, education had become a central part of her life. She spent hours reading, learning new skills, and discovering the world through books and stories. The more she learned, the more she realized how much was possible. Knowledge became not just a tool, but a source of empowerment, allowing her to dream bigger and imagine a future filled with opportunity. Her mornings now started with anticipation, rather than dread. She walked to the park or the learning center with energy in her steps, eager to discover something new each day. Her body was stronger, her mind sharper, and her heart lighter. She noticed the small joys she had previously overlooked: the warmth of the sun, the laughter of children, the simple pleasure of a clean meal. The man often observed quietly, giving her space to grow, but always ready to intervene if danger or difficulty arose. This careful balance taught her that independence and support could coexist. She learned to trust her instincts, make wise choices, and face challenges with courage, all while knowing she had someone who cared. In addition to learning, she began to teach others. She shared her knowledge with children in the neighborhood, helping them read, write, and understand basic skills. Seeing their eyes light up with curiosity and hope reminded her of how far she had come. Teaching became a source of pride and purpose, reinforcing her belief in the power of change and kindness. The girl also started to explore creative pursuits more deeply. She drew, wrote stories, and imagined worlds far beyond her neighborhood. Creativity became a refuge, a way to process emotions, and a path to personal growth. Each new creation was a small celebration of her independence and imagination. Her relationship with the neighborhood evolved slowly. People began to notice her confidence, her willingness to help, and her growing knowledge. While the environment remained challenging, she no longer felt powerless. She could navigate streets with awareness, avoid trouble, and influence situations positively. This newfound capability brought her joy and reinforced her sense of control over her life. She reflected often on her past, not with bitterness, but with understanding. She acknowledged the pain and hardship she had endured, recognizing that those experiences had shaped her resilience. The memories no longer haunted her. Instead, they served as reminders of how far she had come and the strength she had developed. The girl also began to dream about the future in concrete ways. She imagined continuing her education, traveling to new places, and contributing to society. She thought about helping children and families who were still trapped in difficult circumstances, while sharing the hope and knowledge she had gained. These dreams motivated her to keep moving forward, step by step. Her nights became peaceful and reflective. She no longer feared the darkness. Instead, she used quiet moments to plan, dream, and express gratitude for the progress she had made. Sleep became restorative, allowing her to face each day with energy and focus. Over time, she started to understand the true meaning of resilience. It was not just surviving hardship, but using those experiences to grow, learn, and contribute. She felt a sense of pride in her journey, recognizing that each small decision, each moment of perseverance, had brought her closer to the life she wanted. The man continued to support her, not by controlling her, but by mentoring her in ways that encouraged independence. He celebrated her successes, no matter how small, and reminded her of her inherent value and potential. His belief in her reinforced her own belief in herself, creating a cycle of confidence and growth. The girl also began to connect more deeply with others. She formed friendships based on mutual respect, trust, and kindness. These relationships reinforced her sense of community and belonging, showing her that she was not alone in the world. She learned that human connection could heal, inspire, and empower in ways that material support alone could not. She faced challenges, of course. Some days were still difficult, and setbacks occurred. But she had developed strategies to cope, resilience to endure, and hope to carry her forward. Each obstacle became an opportunity to practice patience, problem-solving, and perseverance. The girl also became an advocate in small ways. She shared her story with those willing to listen, showing that change was possible. Her journey inspired others to believe in the potential for improvement in their own lives. She became a quiet symbol of hope, demonstrating that with care, guidance, and determination, one could rise above hardship. Her confidence grew steadily. She no longer flinched at harsh words or hostile glances. She could assert herself, speak her mind, and navigate difficult situations with composure. This inner strength transformed her interactions with the world, allowing her to move with purpose rather than fear. The girl's dreams expanded beyond personal survival. She imagined creating spaces where children could learn safely, where families could receive support, and where hope could be cultivated. Her vision became a driving force, giving her life meaning and direction. The man, seeing her growth, stepped back gradually, allowing her to take more control over her path. He remained a guide and mentor, but the girl had become capable of making independent decisions. Pursuing her goals and helping others, this transition was both a testament to her development and a reflection of the consistent care and patience she had received. By now, the girl had become a source of inspiration for her community. People began to notice the transformation, the confidence, the knowledge, the resilience, and the kindness she displayed. She had moved from being invisible and overlooked to being recognized and respected, not for wealth or status, but for her strength and character. The girl's life had shifted from survival to thriving. She had learned to dream, to hope, and to act on those dreams. Each day was no longer a struggle for existence, but an opportunity to grow, to contribute, and to experience the fullness of life. Her journey from ashes to hope had come full circle. The pain and hardships of her early life had not disappeared, but they no longer controlled her. Instead, they had shaped a resilient, compassionate, determined individual capable of shaping her own destiny and inspiring others. As she looked toward the future, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the support she had received, for the lessons she had learned, and for the strength she had discovered within herself. She understood that life was not perfect, but it was full of possibilities, and she had the courage, knowledge, and hope to embrace them fully. The girl had risen from the ashes not only to survive, but to live with purpose, courage, and vision. Her story was a testament to the transformative power of compassion, trust, and resilience. She had discovered that even in the darkest circumstances, hope could grow and life could be shaped by courage, care, and determination. Her journey was far from over, but she now faced it with confidence, wisdom, and an unshakable belief in the possibility of a better life. She had learned that the past did not define her, that kindness could heal, and that hope could light the way forward. From the ashes of her early life, she had emerged strong, capable, and ready to embrace the future with open arms.